Hi everyone, welcome in. Just gonna. Great, looks like we're getting everyone back into the session. Wonderful stuff. We're just gonna wait a short moment for Julia, our second speaker, to connect, and then we'll get started. And I can see that everyone is slowly jumping back into this session, which is great. So just before we get going, regarding interaction from the crowd, really appreciating all the questions we had in the last session and some of the chat as well. If you have any questions, please do raise them in Q&A. We'll keep track of those so that we can bring them up again in the breakout sessions. Also, if you're having just comments to make, feel free to put those in the chat part of the conversations area. And of course, if you want to use emojis to react at any point throughout the course of the conversation, then please do so as well, because that's always helpful. Great. I'm going to give Julia just 10 more seconds. But in the meantime, I'm just going to introduce Lara Pages, who is one of our speakers. Her background is in civil engineering, and specifically, she actually has a PhD from the Institute of Transportation. After working for a while in the Catalan public administration around mobility, and then further in a number of consultancies for almost a decade, she is now an executive and research manager at Carnet, which is a hub for future mobility research. I'd love to introduce Julia, but I'm nervous about Julia not being online. So I'm going to just take you through Julia's intro while she reconnects. So Julia has a background in political science and international relations and public administration. She currently works for NVBW, which is the agency of the Ministry of Transport for Baden-Württemberg, as a partner manager. And a partner manager basically means that she works with network actors across Baden-Württemberg on consulting initiatives, on projects and communications on the topic of mobility and transformation. Our conversation right now is going to be about the environment. I can see that Julia hasn't managed to reconnect. So Laia, it may be that I ask you a number of questions and this becomes quite a back and forth fireside chat, but that's okay until Julia manages to join.
So happy to do that, everybody. Good morning. I'm very happy to be here and to contribute. Let's hope that Julia gets a connection, but I'm here to ask your questions. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So on the last conversation that was had around mobility, it was societal, but they brought up the point that there's obviously a societal push to move people towards more environmentally friendly modes of transport. And often that's been put the onus on the consumers, on people, on citizens to actually do that. Where do you think the biggest drive behind people moving to more sustainable transport solutions really lies? Is it with the government, with the people, with businesses? Where's the biggest driver, do you think?
Well, it's with society at the end, and it's with it has an impact on behavior of people at the end. I've been working in transportation and in mobility for many years, and I've been simulating and doing models for quite a long time, much more than a decade. And the point is that people, we are not electrons, we are not bytes, we are not data, we are people with our own choices. And these choices are made within ahead of a person with its cultural and its priorities at the end. And this is something that it can be modeled, but it can be also changed. So we are convinced, and I think that this is clear, that the new generations go into a much more sustainable society. We are convinced that this is we are growing in a way that it's going to finish with our planet. And maybe there are some behavioral changes that the old generations are not really decided to make, but the new generations are. And this is the main driver of our way of living, and at the end of our way of moving at the end, and has a very big impact in mobility.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. I've noticed Julia has managed to join us. Julia, can you hear us and can you speak? You're on mute currently. If you unmute.
I do.
Wonderful. Welcome.
I do. I'm sorry. This was like, I don't know. For some reason, just when I was about to go on stage, or however you call it, apologies, but I'm here.
That's okay. So we've done a quick intro. I have introduced you even though you weren't here, so you've been introduced. I'm going to hide myself in a moment and allow the two of you to speak more between each other. Just a quick note, Laia, that there's a slight lag on Julia's voice. So if Julia accidentally cuts over, then it's because there's a lag. She's not trying to cut in front. Just to follow up on what you were saying and to kind of continue the conversation, you mentioned that older generations potentially weren't as keen on the sustainable mode of transport. What ways could we potentially change their behavior and actually push them to be more sustainable in their choices? And I'll leave it to the two of you to discuss, and I'll move myself away.
Well, all these sustainable ways of moving are much more accepted by new generations than by all generations. And the point is that they choose this moving or this way of moving or this mode of transport because of sustainability. This is a choice that was not there some years ago. All these moves to using bikes, all these last mile sustainable delivery devices that we have seen popping up in all our cities, these trolleys, these bikes that have a space to put packets and so on. This is a new trend driven by sustainability and the new choices of our society. Maybe Julia, you are much more in contact with the.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've seen this movement. I'm sure you're all aware of it, Fridays for Future. So this is really driven by young tech-savvy people. So we heard a bit about sharing systems already before, and of course in order to use those cars, in order to use those bikes or pedelecs or however you want to call them, and whatever you want to share, actually you actually really need to be tech savvy. And I'm sure all of you know someone who is a civil server, as you call them, like an elderly person who doesn't own a smartphone, or who doesn't, own a computer, who's not connected to the internet at all. So this is really an issue. If you want to, put these groups into sustainable mobility, into sharing systems, for instance, you need to first enable them to use apps or to use a smartphone. So yeah, I totally agree with Laia. It's really the target group for sustainable mobility is young people. But of course, this will change, eventually when young people grow into middle-aged people. And yeah, you know how it works, I guess.
Yeah, but this is absolutely a challenge, because I have to say that I've moved and I've flown and I've taken planes much more than my parents and than my grandparents, of course. But I've flown less than my kids. So this is the challenge that we have to find as a society, to be able to give this increase in mobility. And this is something that we reduced drastically because of COVID, but it's going to come back. I'm convinced that we are going to move as before in some years, and having this increase in mobility together with these new sustainable modes that are coming, and this is the big challenge to solve as a society. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely,
and this is going to be driven by technology, I think.
It is, but also I've seen an interesting trend. Just last week, I've been in another, I had a presentation going on. Someone showed me some slides about self-active mobility, which is typically going by foot or going by bike. And of course, we have bike sharing and pedelecs, it's sort of a mixture between self-active but also a motor there. And people seem to really enjoy going by foot these days. I mean, of course, if you can leave your house, if you can go somewhere and not just, see your office, people really like it. And so we've seen this trend, for instance, that they go off at a faraway place, like they go off a bus stop before their house, and not just the one which is closer to their house, because they enjoy going by foot, or they try to make a longer bike ride to the office. It's really interesting. that this is, a side effect of COVID, that there's people going into the sustainable modes of transport. And of course, elderly people can use not a bike, but they can use a pedelec bike or an e-bike in order to go further. This is really interesting to see as well.
So you're suggesting that it's actually the enjoyment factor of the travel that can end up being a contributing factor to make you choose more sustainable routes. The aspect you almost touched on it earlier on as well was around flying and around why we fly and the fact that there's likely to be more. Regardless of the technical innovations that will make some flying more sustainable, but realistically, it's not a drastic change. Even with electric flights, it's still not a drastic change for the mass market. Are there any other ways that you can suggest we might curb the impact we're having on the environment from a travel sector standpoint, either from consumers and people, or also from a transportation of goods standpoint, from supply chain, like apart from just technology?
Well, we are moving to behavior again. There are ways to consume that are more local, and there are ways to consume that are more global. We saw some weeks ago with all this problem with this huge cargo boat stuck somewhere, and delaying all the goods of all the world. We all saw that maybe this is not the way to go, and that some things need to change. But again, it goes very, very linked to mobility, to behavior, and the way that we consume and the way that we move at the end. And this goes through regulation. So at the end, if we as society think that we need to move towards a more local consumption of goods, and moving less and going like that, it needs to be regulated. And I guess that Julia, as working for a city, can talk about regulations more than myself, that I come more from the research and the industry area.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're saying something right here. I mean, there is two ways to change behavior, right? Or to change how people move. It's first of all the push and the pull factors. I'm not quite sure if you're familiar with this from a business perspective, maybe, but we can also use it in order to regulate something. So the push factors would be really you make parking more expensive, you make fees or something on transport. This is really the hard regulatory perspective that states usually use, or local governments. But then also, of course, you have to look into pull factors. So like you wanna make this kind of soft laws. You want to encourage people. You want to enable people to make sustainable transport choices. And yeah, for instance, we've been seeing that. I mean, I'm working from home mostly, and when you look out of the window, out of your office or out of your home, you see so many transport vehicles. You see those little trucks bringing parcels to all of your neighbors, or to other stores. And actually, I've just seen like a number recently. Apparently, this will go up by 2030, like even more, like plus 30%. And I don't know how this can be, even how there can be more trucks on the streets. It's crazy. So then there's of course strategies to work around this. You've seen the initiatives by Mrs. Hidalgo in France, in Paris. She wants to make this sustainable quarters, where you don't need to have parcel deliveries right to your door, but you have everything you need within like 15 minutes, like the 15-minute city. I'm sure you've heard this term. And if these are factors you can walk around with, if you can encourage cities to do this, so that no one needs to have this parcel deliveries, but people can go and actually enjoy going by foot, or enjoy going by a bike or something to a nearby store. This is a really interesting and I was impressed when I saw this idea. So I'm really all for looking into those kind of ideas to go on.
Yeah, we have similar endeavors in different parts of the world. absolutely 15 minutes from Mrs. Hidalgo in Paris is one of the trending topics today. There are also the super blocks in Barcelona, which is not 15 minutes, but it's not in the acts of time, but in the acts of space. There are 4 blocks that are mixed together without vehicle entrance, with some kind of restrictions. But this is absolutely a way to organize our cities to be more sustainable. Yes, we are moving in this direction.
What are the benefits, aside from reducing the number of actual trucks, for example, delivering to your door? What are the other benefits for communities to have that kind of way of operating?
Well, benefits are multi-objective, let's say. We do have kids playing at the school, at the streets in Barcelona again. We didn't have it for a couple of decades. We do have grandmas that are walking around because at the end, the space that you were using for cars, now it's used for people. And this is very important in terms of kids playing, grandmas walking, people going to work with bikes and so on. And at the end, this has an impact on health, on the way that we move and on the way that we live with a higher level of life. But I would say that this has an impact on technology as well. Because again, we do have the access to goods and to what we need anyway, going towards a more a greener, a more connected, maybe more shared in the future way of moving in the cities. If this does not exist, then we cannot go towards a 15-minute city or a super blocks in Barcelona. We need technology to be able to give mobility to people in a more optimal way, so that we can have more pedestrian and more cities, more livable cities. No?
Obviously, I mean, there's also there's been, quite a lot of traffics with logistic trucks, for instance, because obviously they park on the streets, so the cars want to move around them. But there's also pedestrians and bikes, and there's a lot of, just, I don't want to say roadkills, but I guess it is. Apology for that word. And if there is any way we can make this safer for just everyone, and as a car driver, you're obviously annoyed. As a bike driver, you're obviously annoyed. And of course, what Laia just said is a really good topic. I mean, there is technology to help us with this. For instance, you can, make specific parking zones with car parking, or this kind of truck parking that can be shared among all the parcel deliveries. And if you have the information, this place is free or this place is not free, come back in 5 minutes, because then the parcel delivery has been made, or the truck is gone. This is really all information you need in order to make logistics more efficient and less annoying for everyone else, and safer, obviously.
And we go back to the point about data again, and it was brought up in the last conversation as well. I mean, the next chat we've got is going to be around technology. We have to close up in just a moment. I would love one sentence from both of you, just on what you view is the biggest trend in the future of mobility with regards to environment over the next 5 years that you expect to see. Just one sentence would be great.
Autonomous driving. I think this is going to change the way we move and the way we live in a more sustainable way, in a greener, sustainable, more shared, I repeat, and more environmentally friendly at the end.
Amazing. Julia?
For me, it would be mobility as a service, MaaS, MaaS, because it changes the way we don't need a car anymore if we have all the different options at our disposal, and that will be just the game changer for city but also the rural area.
Maybe a combination of the two, who knows? Wonderful stuff. Thank you both very much, Julie and Laia. I've just put a poll up live as well. Everyone, if you'd like to just submit and answer that poll, and I'll end the session in just a moment, and then we'll be joining the third fireside chat regarding technology as well. So if you can respond to the poll, thank you again to our speakers, and we'll see you all very shortly in the next fireside chat. Thanks, everyone.